Hello lovely people, it is Victoria. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. It is 10 a.m. right now. I am waiting on a dishwasher repairman to show up at my house, and he still hasn't, and we are halfway into the window that he said he would show up in, so pray for me. So I'm just getting some filming done this morning. I just felt like it. This thing is interesting. I'm playing around with this tripod, and it's on the lowest setting right now, and it's on my desk, and it's like borderline too high for my face, but if I have really good posture, then it's okay. So I'm gonna touch my face a lot in this video probably. So I just filmed an addendum to my Tana Rosanna video, clarifying some things and also bringing some things to your attention that like I did not realize until way later, like the insomnia thing. And then when I was filming the original video, I just got this idea of like exploring some trauma. Let's just like go down memory lane and also take a little detour into Trauma Town. And I just thought that I could maybe make a video explaining something to y'all and telling a bit of a story time. I referenced this in my Tana Rosanna video, and it was the thing that like this whole thing kind of triggered me and just brought a lot of this to the surface and reminded me of like a lot of the work that I'd done on it, and just feeling conflicted and like blaming myself and all that fun stuff. So I figured like maybe we could talk about it on camera and it could be like a fun healing experience. I don't know, but I'm gonna tell you my sexual assault story. So my mannerisms might be really weird. I'm not trying to like make fun of this, but also like this is my experience, so if I want to treat it like it's funny or whatever, like we're gonna tell the story the way I need to tell it, and you can have whatever opinion about it you want to have. I just put on different PJs for some reason. So this story takes place a little over 7.5 years ago. So I had just turned 18, and in the months prior to that, I had entered, I call it like my stir crazy kind of baby hoe phase. I had just kind of had like a casual hookup a few months prior for the first time. I was just trying to like experiment more. I was single. I had never really enjoyed any of the sexual interactions I had had previously, and was trying to flirt more, just maybe hook up with people, just trying to like get out there. I felt very constricted. I'd been very like, let me be in a monogamous relationship and only do this and did it. I felt like I'd been in a box and been very safe up until that point. And so I was just kind of in my sort of rebellious, like exploratory phase. And I'd been in that for a few months. Leading up to turning 18, I was really curious about dating apps and Tinder and things like that. So right after I turned 18, I signed up for Tinder and looked into meeting up with somebody. And at the time, I was just about to start college, and I was in this short little stint working at a coffee shop, and it was this coffee shop / restaurant. It was a giant room, but it was basically two separated sections of this one giant room. It didn't really have a door or anything separating it, but it was like the coffee shop and then a kind of little corridor area with this like partial wall, and then it opened up into this big restaurant. And so I always worked in the coffee shop area. I was always a barista. So it was just this like summer day. It was literally days after I had turned 18. I was about to get on my break and decided to meet up with this person and was like, let's just have, an initial meet cute. I have this 15-minute break coming up and you can come to my job. And it seemed kind of safer, it was like a public space. So I met up with this dude, and we talked for like 10 minutes ish. And I don't remember a lot of specific things about the conversation, but I just remember it feeling off. It just felt like an off vibe. There wasn't anything like majorly wrong with him that I could see, but like it didn't feel right. So I was like, oh, my break's coming to an end. And so this interaction's coming to an end. And we're kind of standing there and, oh God, my throat. Keep being so phlegmy. So this interaction's coming to an end, and we're just kind of standing there awkwardly. And then he initiates this hug, and he goes in. He doesn't ask if it's okay or anything, but I just kind of go along with it because I'm like, oh, it's a hug. Like, that's fine. You know, he's not going in for a kiss or anything. So he automatically goes in for a hug, and it feels kind of assumptive, but I go along with it. And he's holding me there, like, a little too long, and then it happens. So he moves his hand down and starts kind of rubbing my ass. And then that's when I pull back and I say no the first time. And I was like, oh, that's... I forget a lot of specifics about this interaction, but I said, you know, like, oh, maybe don't do that or something like that. And his instinct when I basically said no or asked him to stop was to ask why. Instead of saying okay and stopping like a normal fucking person, he goes, why? And he asked it like all flirtatiously, like he thought this was like a game or something, like, why? And I started kind of subconsciously panicking, and so then I just came up with like the first thing I could think of in that moment, because we were in this front part, this coffee shop part of the restaurant, and it was just the two of us, and there's this partial wall and this giant blind spot, and people could come, you know, from the restaurant area, and they could walk right by, on their way out, they would walk by the coffee shop area and they would see us. And so I was like, oh, I'm worried that one of my managers is going to come out and see us, and I don't want to get in trouble. And that was just like something I thought, you know, an excuse I thought of at that moment. And then he goes, he like sighs in a sarcastic way, and he's like, fine. But then he takes his hand from my ass and he moves it to the front of me and starts rubbing the front part of my vaginal area over my clothes. And then that's when I really don't remember how I handled the interaction. I don't remember how I ended it. I don't remember what I said. But it was probably just some way of saying, oh, we should, you know, stop. Oh, like this isn't, yeah, I completely kind of, I blacked that out. Like I just kind of dissociated. I don't know what I said. But I said no at least once. And even if I hadn't said no, it was very obvious I was not okay with what was happening. I did not consent. I was not informally consenting. I was not enthusiastic about what was happening at all. Like, I feel like anyone that gave a shit could see that I was clearly very nervous, but he didn't give a fuck. So anyway, I somehow got out of that interaction, ended, and then I just felt weird about it. Later on that night, I looked at my Tinder app, and this dude he sent me just this super like casual, nonchalant message. Was just like, how was work, you dick? Whatever, because we had been texting, and like earlier before we met up, I think we were calling each other a dick as like a joke. I don't know. But he was just like, oh, how was work? Just like totally nonchalant, like completely unaffected, not acknowledging that interaction at all, like clearly didn't think there was anything wrong with it. And I still just felt really weird about it, but I couldn't really put a finger on why it felt off. So I just unmatched with him on Tinder. And Tinder gives you like a little menu of options that you can put for why you're unmatching with somebody. And I put something along the lines of like inappropriate offline behavior, and just unmatched with him. And that was kind of the end of it. It felt weird though for like days afterward. I just felt strange. So I ended up telling, over the course of the next few days, I ended up telling two people that are really close to me. And I don't want to be like super specific about who they were. But so the first person I told validated me immediately, and was just like, I reached out, not really sure what was that, but I was like, okay, this thing happened a few days ago, and I feel kind of weird about it. I don't really know how to feel. I don't know if this was normal, or I don't know if this was something that was wrong, or if I did something wrong. Like, I'm just really confused about this. I don't know how to feel about it. So this happened, this person touched me, blah, blah, blah. And they were like, no, that totally wasn't okay. That was absolutely assault. Like, you did not do anything wrong. And if you feel comfortable, you might want to like tell some other people. So I told this person that they recommended, and this person also, who's close to me, also very much validated me and believed me and was like, that was not your fault. This was assault. But then when I kind of expressed like, oh, what do I do now? What should I do now? It was kind of just presented to me that like there wasn't a lot for me to do, because basically this person laid out to me like the cards were stacked against me to the point that like it was going to be hard to believe me, and a lot of people were going to be of the predisposition to not believe me, because turns out my job where this happened, it did not have any security cameras, which pissed me off because there was this freaking hose like faucet thing in this restaurant that literally was always running. They were always running water constantly 24 hours a day, so they had the money to pay for their water bill for constantly wasting water, but they didn't have enough money for some fucking security cameras to protect their employees. That's bullshit. So it still makes me mad. Honestly, it still makes me mad. In fucking 2017, you're not gonna have security cameras in a place where you regularly would have one employee working on their own in a totally separate part of the restaurant. No security cameras. Anyway, insane. There was no like written reference to it happening in our messages or anything, and I'd unmatched with him, so I didn't have records of our messages anymore. Didn't even know this dude's last name, knew his first name, and could point him out in a lineup. I would still be able to point him out in a lineup today. Like, I remember his face. But I didn't have a lot of usable information, and because we met on a dating app, it was true though that like there were just a lot of things about that situation that could have been used against me. It would have been, my word against his, and I wasn't raped or anything that would have allowed for like a rape kit or DNA collection or any, like, there was no physical evidence. I didn't have any evidence. So yeah, I never reported it. And then a couple years later, it started kind of bugging me in the back of my mind of like, he probably has done that to other people, and wondering if that was my fault for not reporting him. But it really is like a double-edged sword, because if you report, then you get completely interrogated, and it's like, why should we believe you? And there's no actual evidence. But then when you don't report, then it's like, why didn't you report? And then you look less legitimate for that. But it's like, you really are damned if you do, damned if you don't. I also wanted to talk through this because I recognize like years later, it didn't really occur to me initially like how hard on myself I was about this happening, because it's like you can consciously logically recognize that it's assault and that it wasn't your fault, and this was done to you and it wasn't okay, but there was always these instincts of like minimization and rationalization. I subconsciously kind of blame myself for it, because my instinct to protect myself by giving that excuse of like, when I first said no and he asked me why, and I was like, oh, I'm afraid my managers will see us. There was some voice in my head that for a long time said that by doing that, I didn't make it clear enough that I didn't want to be touched. I was, giving a mixed message. I was leaving room for him to interpret that I did want it, but I just didn't want other people to see it. And so then I would think like, oh, maybe that's why he reached around and touched me, because he still thought I wanted it, because I didn't make it clear enough that I didn't want it. I never consented. I never said he could touch me. I did not, but I still thought, I was like, oh, I may have I may have muddied the water. I may have made it confusing. I may have not made it clear enough that I didn't want this. I did not make it clear that I did. That is legit enough. I'm like mad because I'm like yelling out of anger for this like self-blame that I had. And then even in, legitimizing your own trauma and recognizing that it wasn't okay, there's this like instinct to compare and kind of minimize what you've gone through in comparison to other people. I look at examples of like survivors of sexual abuse that are like so brave and inspiring, like freaking Rachel Den Hollander, who is the first person to publicly accuse Larry Nassar of sexual abuse. I look at someone like her and I'm just like in awe of her, and if I were to meet her, I would want to like talk about like the amazing things she's done for survivors and the amazing things like she represents. But then sometimes like even lumping myself in as a survivor, I almost feel like I don't count, or like it's not legit enough, like I don't fit into a category enough, because it's this instinct of like comparing that to like what other people have been through, but it's not a competition, and like your trauma doesn't have to compare against other people's in a certain way in order to be legitimate. But I just like didn't even realize until later just how critical I was and how just discounting I was. And for a long time after that, I thought that like consent was something I had to like negotiate with somebody, or I had to like just always feel guilty if I didn't want to do something that someone else wanted to do. And I just like didn't feel like I could just stand on business and just say no and have that be enough. It still just felt like this, I was just torn a lot. And then looking back and kind of recognizing how that pattern may have played into like me later on experimenting with substances and contributing to this sense of feeling out of control and just not wanting to care and kind of wanting to numb myself out, and just kind of realizing like, oh, that probably played more of a role than I realized it did. So that was just kind of a very disorganized way of telling that story, to just say like, if you've been touched without your consent, it was not your fault. That was not okay. You did nothing to deserve it. Your trauma is legitimate. However you need to process it is legitimate. Obviously do what you can to not hurt other people and to still be considerate of other people. But do whatever you need to do. If you feel like you need to report, then report. If you're not ready to report, that's totally okay. Just know that the further actions of that person have absolutely nothing to do with you, and you are not responsible for them. And yeah, so that was kind of a random video, but I just wanted to put that out there for anyone that might need to hear it, because I definitely needed to hear it at a lot of different points. So I'm going to call that good. I'm going to go eat a bagel and hope that this dishwasher man shows up at some point before I have to go get ready for work. And yeah, so thank you all for listening, and let me know what you thought of this video. I also realized I need to start putting call to actions at the beginning and end of my videos. So like, comment, subscribe, comment for your engagement. I hope you have a lovely day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.